Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about Office Hours at officehours.global. If you are already in our question engine, Mukana, you can already start to ask questions and vote on those questions. And those questions basically run the entire show. First hour is general questions about anything, any question you have around media and virtual production. And the second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have Elk Live here. We're pretty excited about that. So they're going to answer your questions about remote music production. We're pretty excited about how that actually works. And then we will also, on tomorrow, we're going to talk about ruthless reviews. Warning everybody, ruthless reviews. If you are new to this, this means that we're going to go through everybody's camera setup and talk about what works and doesn't work. About what they're doing. Now we're going to try something new on Thursday. We're going to follow up with a setup behind the setups call or a second hour. So the first one, we're going to talk about what works and didn't work, but the second one is more of a show and tell for folks who, for those of the panel that want to really show how, really how it all works for each one of their setups. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we'll get to some of them. Friday, our own Laura Thompson will be on, and she's going to talk about accessibility and what it means and why it's important. We're very excited to have her on and talk about that. And then Saturday has become, once again, the long day. Education starts at 8 o'clock. Remember that is not streamed. I will actually be sitting in for Nick Justishin at 10. Nick did an incredible overview of his Unreal Fellowship project last Saturday. Hopefully that got some people ready to go. You should go back and watch it if you didn't see it. And I'll be talking really in depth about at least how I approach using metahumans and how I approach building stuff with metahumans. We're going very slowly. So we'll do that this week. And then next week, we'll talk about getting it into Unreal. We did a lot of steps quickly before, and it was too hard for people to keep up. So we're kind of backing up and just going through one step at a time. At noon, Hosmuk and Damayanti will be back. Damayanti is going to take us through yet another recipe, and I will actually be there as well. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. So hopefully some of you will join us and cook along together. So it's a really interesting collaborative learning / training lab. So definitely you can come to watch, but it's more fun if you play along. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from our old friend Paul Wallace, who's back in the panel here after a while off from Austin, Texas.
Paul.
Yeah,
it's great to see you. I was getting close to reaching out to Paul. I was like, what happened to Paul? So like
I just got entranced by the Olympics for a while. That's all.
Okay, I see. I see where we sit in your.
Sports, Alex. Sports in the hierarchy.
Well, it's good to have you back, Paul.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul's question this morning is: any thoughts on resumes and how to make yours stand out from a crowd?
Everyone, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I can tell you, at least in our business, you can send me a piece of paper and I'm absolutely not going to read it. Just send me to your YouTube channel. Show me what you got.
Yeah, go
if
ahead,
I like it, I'll let you cut for us. Mm-hmm. That's all I care. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care who you know. I might look at LinkedIn. I know Alex really likes LinkedIn. I just want to see what you do.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, that's precisely what I was going to say. I work with, for example, a ton of composers that never went to any music, like formal music school. And a lot of them are very, very good.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the delivery of a resume, ones are really impressive, ones which are actually their website. So it's, there with because then they can have live links to whatever work and stuff that they've done. So consider, making a single page kind of website for your as a resume.
Yep, Stuart.
I'd just like to point out as not a rebuttal to Mr. Fenwick's comments, because I agree with them wholeheartedly, but a lot of employers, when they advertise a position, will ask for which school you went to and which brand of editing software you will use, which are all irrelevant to the skills of actually being a good editor or being a good camera person, whatever. Your work is far more important than the piece of paper.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, I'll just present some comments on, like, in a corporate environment. I mean, if I'm involved in the recruitment process, and that involves resumes. That's just kind of a fact of it. If I'm presented with a bunch, there's some things I look at pretty quick. One, I want it to be a nice looking document. I mean, if you're presenting me with a resume, that should be skill number one, that you can actually format a nice looking document. I need the electronic copy in text format. Don't give me a scanned image. I like for 2 pages of, and not too dense, because I like, if I'm going to print it, I would like room on there to make my own notes or whatever, and you don't want it to be too dense. If there's a 3rd page, it really better be worth it. And then I like page numbers. If you do print it, and you get those pages out of sequence, I like to see, what page I'm looking at of somebody's resume.
Go ahead, Sky. That's incredible feedback, Rupert. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, keywords. Oftentimes the person that you're sending this to is not the person you're going to be working for. They are just looking for a thing that they've been told that department is looking for. So yes, hardware, software references sometimes can be very helpful. And again, those are just as critical of who you've worked for and what part of the process did you do in that creation of that thing.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
First of all, I haven't written a resume in over 15 years, but when I did write my resumes, I'd always keep the first paragraph or 2 completely blank. And the reason why is because you gotta make it unique for every employer that you're going to, because you end up going in there and having to fill out your resume on a piece of paper anyway. So having the first couple paragraphs where you've researched the company, a little bit of information, and how you can merge with that information from that company will probably give you the advantage.
I have to say, I don't think I've ever gotten a job that I was chosen by my resume. I have to submit resumes. I always have a resume that's around, that's available. I have to tidy it up every once in a while. And it's usually because there's some submission process that requires a CV along with the submission. But I don't think in my whole life I've gotten a job because I sent a resume in. Like, I don't think and that may be that I'm really bad at it, or I think I've sent like 4 resumes in my whole life. I just don't, to me, everything is all about knowing people, and building, and working with people, and then hopefully having a good experience with them. Go ahead, Rupert.
I've also seen them necessary as part of work visas or travel permits to work overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila in the Philippines comes in with the next question. He says, Alex, any update on the Blackbird 8x8 HDMI matrix? Monoprice has dropped the price to 10 cents below $650.
Did he really say it that way? 10 cents below $600?
No, but I thought reading $649.90 was going to be more confusing.
All right. I will eventually turn it on. Like, it's on, and I plugged it all in, and the routing wasn't right, and then I couldn't find the manual. And I've been, the last couple months have been a little grueling. I just got out of it. I just finished it yesterday. So I have later this week to put together the thing. If you ask me on Saturday, I will know, because the wires are all, I ordered all the wires from Monoprice. So all the HDMI, long HDMI cables to get to all the monitors and do all the things. And they're already plugged in. I just have to open it up and bang on it. So I'll have more information on Saturday. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. When should honeycomb grids be used on studio lighting like softboxes?
Go ahead, Carl.
So honeycombs are pretty cool. You can have quite a large softbox, so let's say 2 feet by 2 feet. And so what it does, if you don't have a honeycomb grid, essentially the light goes in kind of 180 degrees. So it covers pretty much straight out. There'll be more light directly out. What a honeycomb does is it concentrates the light more directly. So it will still be soft, especially if you get it close to your subject, but it won't have spill, and it will actually cause some shadows. They're not going to be hard shadows, but it will give more contrast. So you can get closer to maybe a Rembrandt lighting using honeycomb than you can without honeycomb. But it's not hard spot like fashion kind of photography light. It's not that kind of stuff.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I can demonstrate here the benefit of a honeycomb grid. If I turn off my backlight, you see that now looks completely black, even though it's a 20% gray, because my 2 lights, my key light and my fill light here, have a honeycomb grid. So it's very directional. And so there's no fall off or minimizing any fall off that's behind me. So that's really kind of in this environment, the real benefit of that, you can have the light very much more focused on you because of the grid, and therefore you don't need that much power to light up and have a really colorful background. So that's how I'm using honeycomb grids.
Stuart and Bill, real quick.
Okay, I'll try to be quick because some of the stuff that's just been said is not accurate from a physics point of view. Honeycomb grids are generally black, so they don't reflect light. They absorb light. They're a very good way of controlling the shadows around a diffuse source. They are useless for a point source. We'll leave it at that.
Bill?
Everything everybody said, but for me, there's two other dimensions. You can buy grids. The fabric grids are the most popular. They are flexible, store and travel easily. You can get hard grids that snap on the front of things. They're more for studios and a little bit of a pain to travel with. And the depth of the fabric or the plastic on a grid will determine how much it focuses the light in one direction. Cut, spill.
Next question.
Moving on to Anthony B. Bridgewater in New Jersey. Anthony says, can you recommend a Wi-Fi solution like a MiFi or phone tether for live streaming to Facebook for outdoor events where other internet sources aren't available, using a laptop and an ATEM Mini Pro? Low budget options, please.
Go ahead, Carl.
So you have the ATEM Mini Pro. You're going out to Facebook. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone that has tethering, you're set.
Yep. Go ahead, Stuart.
Didn't actually ask for the streaming on camera. It asked for a Wi-Fi solution for the phone to tether to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 4G router with Wi-Fi connection and Ethernet connection, and it gets the extra aerials there from Netgear. The 2100 is the current version of that.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, so very similar. This is the TP-Link version. This is a 4G one. The 5G ones at the moment are quite expensive, although with the 4G ones like this, typically I get around about 80 meg in down and up around about 40.
Yep. Go ahead, Rupert.
There's also a little PepLink unit. It's under $100. It doesn't do the load balancing everything, but it is a good little router that can connect to a 4G modem. That would give you some, useful functionality also. But just keep in mind these outdoor events, if there's going to be crowds, just watch out for how saturated the 4G or 5G networks could be when you're trying to do that event.
Good guy.
Sorry. So this is the live view. It isn't that cheap, but what's the cost of failure? This is $999, but this will give you the opportunity to put in 2 USB modems. So if I like to go with different providers, so if one tower is somebody else's, I can hop over to a different tower that might be less crowded because of the crowds. And then I could also do Ethernet and Wi-Fi as well. So it's 4, and then it combines them up in the cloud. It's a service that you can get called LRT, which does cost another $300 a year. So again, what's your event worth and what's your reputation worth if you fail off of one? So my recommendation would be to step up to a live view or one of the bigger PEP links if that's in the budget.
Go ahead, Leo.
So as it said, low budget options, and I've said that device is under $100. And you can buy the different SIMs and you can get different SIMs. Be careful about SIMs. Some are locked at the speed that they can go at. If you want an unlimited SIM, you really need to choose it. But the other thing I would always say in an event, sort of what Guy's saying, but in a different approach, your friend here is the ISO versions of the ATEMs and record everything so that if for whatever reason the world doesn't receive it, at least you've got everything recorded so that you can provide something to your customer.
Yeah, good. Mickey and then Stuart, quickly.
Yeah, +1 for the PepWave and live view solutions. But on the ground, don't use Wi-Fi. Once you have that internet connection in, be it from mobile or whatever source, use hardline on the ground.
I'm tethered right now to a phone. I'm at a hotel. The Wi-Fi was breaking up, anyone who saw me before the show. And I think I'm pretty stable now. But that's because I have a USB-C to Lightning into my iPhone, and then I'm using my Verizon to stream. Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, one thing with the live view that Guy showed us and the same box that I'm using, if you're going to grab the USB modems for the live view or one of these things, you've got a TS9 connection on the side of it. You can put an external aerial on that, and that will give you, like even a cheap aerial from JCar and the equivalents in the US, will give you a 7 dB gain over everybody's mobile phone. So that will help cut through the traffic a little bit, because the base station that you're connecting to, the cell tower, sees you having a stronger signal that's easier for it to lock onto. So it'll keep a hold of that one. You can also get active aerials and aerials that you can focus on the base station. So that helps you. The other thing with all of these devices is they have a maximum bandwidth. So if you try and push 4K in multiple streams, it will die. So you might want to think about 1080 or 720 as your maximum.
And also remember that if you're going to go to multiple locations through a cell signal, you're much better off going once to AWS or Restream or something else, and then do your distribution in the cloud. Don't ever do over cellular. Don't ever try to do more than one. Next question.
Comes from Hesma Kajar, who's often in the panel here from Cape Town, South Africa. I mentioned yesterday that what I'm planning to record in ProRes, the 6K records in RAW. My question, does HDMI change anything? Well, it turns out it does. Can Carl or Ken or Jonas share with the meeting what we stumbled on?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, what we found out is as soon as you if you set your camera, set the 6K Pro to ProRes, as soon as you plug in an HDMI cable, it goes to Blackmagic Raw. The only way around that was to plug, the only way I found around it was to plug the 6K Pro into my Blackmagic monitor and then loop out from that monitor into the ATEM. Sorry, I should correct that. As soon as you plug an HDMI cable into the 6K Pro into an ATEM, it won't record in a ProRes RAW.
So, but it will record ProRes RAW if it's in the monitor.
If it goes into the monitor and then that monitor then loops into the ATEM, it will. But you won't. But you then lose camera control.
Right. It's always something. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. So the speculation we tried to get to, and it sounds about right, is that if you have a 6K plugged into an ATEM, the camera control, it's got more to do with the ISOs. So if you're going to do ISOs and you want to relink the ISOs in DaVinci, it can only relink the B-RAW. It can't relink ProRes. So this is just a feature they've put in there. Mm-hmm. But if you put something in the middle that blocks the camera control and it doesn't know it's plugged into an ATEM, then yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, Courtney.
And I just want a little clarification from Ken there. By monitor, do you mean just a Blackmagic monitor or the video assist, which is also a recorder? And
sorry, yeah, I should have clarified. It was the video assist. The way around it was all he had to do was just get a Ursa Mini G2 that can record ProRes, and you plug that into, and you can still control that from the ATEM, but via the converter, the SDI to HDMI converter. That was the only way we could work out, but it's a rather expensive way of getting ProRes and control via an ATEM.
Next question.
Comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, can the panel recommend any Windows-based tablets as alternatives to the Microsoft Surface?
Whoa. I was like, when I first started reading that, I was like, oh yeah, Microsoft Surface. And then I thought alternatives to the Microsoft Surface. I was like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Go ahead, Rupert.
What I have right now, I think I mentioned this the other day, is this. This is actually a Dell tablet, but it's kind of old. It's I think it's an 8-inch, but it runs Windows. It's x86, but I would like something like this, just a bit more modern. And this only has one USB port.
And you don't like the Surface?
I do. I just would like some choices. So
right. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
I loved this question when I read it, and I thought, oh, I'll go and do some Googling and have a look. And the only thing I could find was A, there are tablets that have ARM processors, and there is Windows 10 and Windows 11 on ARM. And B, nobody makes any drivers for them. So I think you're kind of limited to the Microsoft product, which seems silly because you can get Windows on ARM to run on the Pi, so it should run on other devices as well.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So Dell has a couple, and I don't have the exact model numbers, but they are they're 2-in-1s and of course tablet version laptops. The bigger thing is, what are you going to do on it here? Because if you're going to be doing any type of live streaming from that, I would highly recommend go for a full laptop. And the one I've been promoting for everybody is the Asus ROG. That's the Republic of Gamers. And I don't think they make a tablet version of it. They make a regular laptop version.
And go ahead, Courtney.
HP makes a broad variety of HP laptops that are either combos that can break apart or fold over, and I have one that's just a tablet itself, an 8-inch that works fine. They all run on either ATEM or some up to Core i7, but you can get cheap ones. I've gotten some for under $150 that have ATEM processors, which is a quad-core processor, and it all runs Windows 10 just fine. So there's lots of choices out there, and there's lots of Chinese choices as well that you can find for the 8-inch, and they come with Windows installed on them.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. Again, what ways can the panel recommend for diffusing par can lights into wash lights from point sources other than bouncing off of surfaces?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, a par can isn't a true point source because of the way they're shaped and the way the light scatters in the tube. They're almost parallel, but they're not a point source. Easy one is a Broly style diffuser sitting a few feet out in front of it. It's or you can actually also modify a softbox to sit there, and you can get frames that you can put multiples of par cans in behind a Broly reflector, and they are very soft light sources on set.
Go ahead, Carl, and then Mickey.
So Brolys are good for photography. In the film world, you're going to use what's called butterflies and scrims. So there's a whole art form to this. Pretty much you can do a masterclass on butterflies and then another masterclass on scrims, on how to control the light and open scrims and close scrims. But that's kind of where you're looking at as far as turning a coherent focused light into a broad soft light.
Mickey?
Yeah, just to build on what both Stuart and Carl mentioned, you can get rolls of diffusion, like say from a company like Roscoe, and put them in a 4x4 frame. If you need something bigger, that's when you go into butterflies. So what Carl mentioned, you can get them in 8x8, 20x20, and 40x40. Butterflies are essentially large pieces of silk stretched on a frame.
Bill, real quick.
If you're inheriting them, I can understand why you do it, but it's really kind of going the opposite direction. Parabolic reflectors in par cans are designed to throw a beam, and that's the opposite of a softbox. There's 100 different kinds of lights. It'll be better to fill a soft source than a par can, but if you've got it, I guess you have to use it.
Next question.
Leo Mendel in Pinner, UK is up next. With the UK has announced PSTN and ISDN, will be switched off at the end of 2025. How will this affect the broadcast industry?
Mickey?
I haven't used ISDN in 7-8 years now. It's all been replaced by IP audio transports.
Yeah, Stuart?
It won't affect the broadcast industry at all, simply because the broadcast industry uses a completely separate backbone to what we can roughly call the civilian phone service, which is what's being replaced.
Go ahead, Rupert, and then Leo.
So even in other cases where it may be used, I mean, this is a core network change. What they will do to any existing installations is install devices that translate, their IP infrastructure and present it, if existing customers still need it, into an ISDN handoff locally on the site, just as they will do with analog phones. They'll still present an analog interface. It'll just be transported over essentially IP.
Yep, Leo.
One of the advantages I can see is that the potential of people dialing in or calling in on broadcasts will be improved, because we won't be expecting the call quality of or defaulting back to the basic quality. And it'll be interesting to see if the phone companies will implement better codecs on the standard transport between locations, because in the past, it's always been some really old codecs that are to run calls between different locations. So I wonder if we're going to see advantages in that respect and changes.
Next question.
Moving on to Simon Livingston of Windsor in the UK. He says, does any of the panel have experience of the BMD Ursa Broadcast?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I've played around with some rental ones at an event. You need to give them a bit of light, so EV10 or above, so which is kind of like overcast day or above. So if you're indoors, you need to add a bit of light. The sensor is a Super 16. In photography terms, it's 1 inch. The B4 mount has a reducer, or what some people call a speed booster. So it actually reduces a B4 lens down onto expands that onto a larger sensor. Essentially, it has all the features that you'd find on an Ursa. There's a few that you'll find on the 12K and the G2 that are a little bit more succinct to them. But for the price at $3,500 US, if you can get one, they're a back order at the moment, and you're working outdoors or you're working in bright events, and you've got B4 lenses or you have access to rental of B4 lenses, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Yeah, it's just not a low light beast, that's all.
Yeah, the low light performance is stunningly bad. Like in my opinion, we got them right when they first came out and did tests against charts with them, and we just found that they were much sharper than other 2/3 inch chips that we were using. So we were excited about that, but the low light made them really hard for us to find a place that we would use them indoors on a regular basis. One of the advantages that they have, if you can get the light, is that they, again, the B4, for those of you who don't use that, is really a standard in broadcast. So you can get all kinds of box lenses and big lenses and all kinds of broadcast lenses, and it's relatively inexpensive and I think that it made sense for Blackmagic to build a camera that did this. But I think squeezing, and I think this is a problem for many chips that are trying to squeeze 4K into a 2/3 inch pocket, package, is that it's just the low light performance suffers because the sensor sites are so small. And so, and you can see the opposite of that if you look at something like a Canon ME20 or ME200, where the sensor site, they took HD and put it on a full frame sensor, and you can see almost at night. And so there's a real, so when you think about really high resolution and really small packages, I would have preferred it to stay at 1080p if they were going to do 2/3. I also find that the longer depth of field for the 2/3 inch chips, and this is every 2/3 inch chip, is not great. Next question.
Adrian Albeck in Brisbane, Australia says, can I please get a suggested shopping list to set up a room for 5.1 surround with a future migration to immersive mixing? He wants the PC plus the interface plus the speaker. He wants us to exclude acoustic treatment and air conditioning, and he would like the total to be under 10,000 US.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to start at the budget end. So let me bring this up for you. So this is pretty much best bang for the buck, around that price, if you just want to get into starting out. But if you're serious about it, then you're going to go up to something that's 16 channels. This may be overkill. So we've gone from one to the other. But what this does is we give you 16 channels, pretty much, which is what you're going to find in most studios. You won't go past this unless you go into like an event site. What this will give you is a lot of flexibility, upgradability as well. So as far as the speakers, $10,000. So let's say you've still got maybe $5,000 left. SVS Ultras in the United States are probably best bang for the buck. So the larger speakers are about $1,000 each. They sell the floor standings individually. And the reflective ones, which are dipole ones, which you can use on the ceilings, and you can actually run 2 channels into these, so you can have left and right, if you want. But they're around the $600-700 mark, and it's about $2,000 for the sub. But $10,000, if you kind of go for that kind of, I want everything upgradable, then Monoprice this is a pretty outstanding unit. There are ones from Yamaha and Denon that have like 11 channels out on XLR as well, so you can look at those too.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that what Carl showed there is an AVR, which is good for playing back surround and immersive mixes, but not for actually creating mixes. Aside from your machine, aside from the computer, of course, you would need an interface that would get enough channels out. I would recommend going with at least 16 channels if you're planning for immersive down the line. And of course, after that, after your interface, your signal needs to go through a monitor controller that can first calibrate your monitoring system level wise and time delay wise and also EQ wise, and some would allow you to instantly monitor a down mix, a 5.1 down mix or a 7.1 down mix or a stereo down mix from the Atmos immersive mix. And after that monitor controller, of course, you would need the individual speakers and monitors and the mounting hardware and power distribution that you'd need to accompany those speakers with. I would say, so yeah, those are the big ticket items: the interface, monitor controller, and the actual speakers. I would say I would save up a bit more than 10K. Because first off, like what I would highly recommend is you invest in the infrastructure first for immersive. Get all the power lines run, get all the audio lines run, because you don't want to have to tear down walls whenever you have to put additional speakers, which I'm dealing with right now. I would say you can get a really good, really decent stereo monitoring setup with 10K. But if you want to build something that's 5.1 or higher, I would save up at least 30K. Oh, check out GDC has a show from Dolby that talks about setting up an affordable system.
Would you recommend thinking 5.1 or 5.14? Like if you're going to think about what you're going to mix to, would you want the overheads?
Yeah, at this point, like I would want to eventually start mixing, like anything that requires me to deliver 5.1 and 7.1, I would just mix it in Atmos and deliver a re-render that's in the channel-based format that they need, just because it's so much easier to get the smaller formats out once you've done the bigger format.
Right, and note that the size of your room makes a big difference, and you know how your room looks. You can mix it. You can actually do some of the mixing in the headphones, but as the room gets bigger, you get more resolution of how it feels in that room. That's why surround mixes that are done for theater is actually done in a theater-sized room. So so they can actually hear what it's going to sound like, in that area, and you just don't have the same resolution. It's kind of like working with a small image and then scaling it up. Go ahead, Sky.
Just a quick question for Carl. Cabling and engineering, do you have a preference on cabling? And what would the cost be? I think he talked about, don't worry about the aesthetics and the sound mix, the sound design, but engineering wise.
So if you're going, like I'm showing like a consumption. So that's what I'm showing here. So this is actually listening to it back. I guess a monitoring room as far as listening to it back. If you're going for what Mickey's saying, then you'll probably go for powered speakers. So powered monitors. So you just got to get a lot of them. And with what I'm saying, what I'm showing, which is a passive speakers, you want to go with probably 18 AWG. So yeah.
But the cable, is cabling an issue, or is just any old cable good?
No, it's going to be the AWG, so the wide gauge. So 18 AWG is pretty good for sending out like 100 watts of audio.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly. If you're going with passive speakers, you get the cable that's properly rated for the wattage that you're pushing through it. In terms of powered speakers, active speakers, then it depends what it's taking. If you're sending analog balanced audio, then I'm a huge fan of Belden installation cable, and they of course also have cable that is rated for plenum, for laying them in a plenum. And if you're going with active speakers that take digital straight in, then it's easy. It's either you go 110 ohm AES cable or Cat 6 for Dante.
By the way, it's good to have you back, Mickey. That's all I have to say. All right. Go ahead, Bill. Next question.
JHB in New York is up next, and he asks, when recording on site, is there any benefit to setting up a separate network with a travel router for multiple pan-tilt-zoom cameras and pan-tilt-zoom controller and other equipment that is different than the venue network? Thanks.
Richard?
Generally, I wouldn't trust the venues network, regardless of anything else. But for PTZ,
and this is coming from a person who has a venue.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust my own venue unless I knew it. But it's the kind of thing where, especially with PTZs and other things, you can test it beforehand. It's all set up, ready to go. You know what the links are. You know where the problems are. Then you just lift it and drop it into the other venue.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Don't worry about anything else.
Courtney?
Yeah, all my portable cases have built-in small routers like a TP-Link or something with 4 local area network ports that you can wire all the stuff in the case that connects to via wired, and then the wireless connection for anything that doesn't, and it's all a private network with their own private passwords, and nobody else can get on it. If I do need to hook into a WAN, I'll plug a WAN into it so that I can give all those things internet access. But staying on the local area network is best.
Rupert and then Leo.
Yeah, there are some definite advantages to having your own network and some definite risks if you go on the site's network. I mean, having your own network, you get 100% control and 100% access to it if you have to troubleshoot it. That might not be the case if you're on a venue network. If you're looking at travel routers, though, I mean, you've got to be careful about how many devices you're talking about. Those little travel things are good for a few, but wouldn't be too long before you're up to needing something a bit more robust than just a travel router.
Let me go ahead, Leo.
I would add also that to change your default network, so don't be on 192.168.1 or 100 because you want to have a completely different network that you know is going to not interfere with their network. And if you need to plug into it, you can route through it. So, choose something completely different.
You go, Jeffrey.
Routers have one of 2 functions. The first function is to actually give the computer their IP address through DHCP or through a static IP address, which you can put into the device or machine. And then 2, cause some sort of protection from the outside world. So the router is not the biggest issue. What I have is I have a little GL iNet slate, which does all the routing, but everything is static IPs, so it doesn't have to call to the router at all. And then, of course, I have a switch, which is an 8-port switch, and it's a PoE switch. So I can run my PTZ cameras without having to have a power and an Ethernet cable, because I will go Ethernet cable every single time over Wi-Fi. And then I'll try and disable the Wi-Fi off of that as well to keep things as low as possible. And then if I need to disconnect from their network, I can do it in a heartbeat.
Next question.
John Agapitos, it looks like, from Sydney, Australia, says, "Hi guys, I have a Synology disk station with a 10 gig interface connected via fiber to an HP switch. I'd like to connect my iMac Pro to the switch and take advantage of 10 gig. I've seen 2 SFPs HP for $449 and a Ubiquity for $120. Which one should I buy and why?"
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, check out fs.com and SmallNet Builder. They have good tables that show compatibility for SFP modules. So you of course want to pick the same module for either end. So you need to find one that works both with HP and whatever SFP NIC you would install on your iMac.
Next question.
Peter Pergethhofer in Vienna says, "Does anyone know an easy way to create AR-style effects in live video? For example, 3D objects that are rendered when a certain AR marker or QR code is visible in the picture."
I guess the question that I'm trying to figure out here is, if you're talking about AR-style effect with live video, is it the user that has the live video? Are they holding up their phone and then 3D objects are rendered when that's what I'm assuming, is someone picks up their phone, they point at a QR code and an object pops out. There are probably the leading libraries for that right now are Google has a library, Apple has a library, and Facebook has libraries that will be responsive to the QR code. Basically, the QR code has to process a location, or it has to process where it has to be there, and then, or just it doesn't even have to process a location. It just has to process. There is a command that's inside that QR code that app is designed to react to. So it says, go grab that, the QR, it pulls the QR code out and has an argument, and that argument means something to your AR app. And that app is going to then pull up a 3D model, and those are things that it's not, but to my knowledge, there's no way to do that with drag and drop. It's all still, that's pretty much developer tools. And I think that the company that's kind of moving out in front right now is Apple, but there are others that are moving along. Google was way ahead by years, and then they kind of gave up, and then they realized they were behind again. So next question.
Simon Livingston in Windsor in the UK is in next with, "Could the panel share their dream specs for the next generation of the full-size ATEMs?"
I guess I'll kick it off while I'm waiting. I would love to see Dante. If we're talking about dreams, I can dream, but like a Dante interface, so that I could get audio into it in a reasonable way. At least Matty that was symmetrical would be a huge first step. To just have the everything going in and out. So those would be the first two things I would think about. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'd like to. None of them have scalers on them right now. And the larger ATEMs, I'd like to see a Teranex quality scaler on each input, and of course balanced audio inputs as well.
They have a scaler now. I mean, they do scale now.
On the super big ones. Oh, they do.
The Constellation and everything they've made in the last couple of years. So only the gray, all the black ones have scalers on every input. It's just the gray ones that are older and don't have those scalers.
Of course, I have all the gray ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Television Studio HD.
Yeah, absolutely, John.
So Noah Sargent, who was here on the panel yesterday, did a fantastic 20-minute video of him speculating the future coming ATEMs. It's an outstanding video. It's on YouTube. Search for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
I know he's talking about dream specs, and this is an area I don't know lots about, but the thing that I'm really interested in is where it's going to go in the cloud and how that's going to happen and what it will be of being able to do this sort of thing in the cloud and how we will move away from taking large trucks of stuff to various different locations to set it up. I mean, it should be just plug a camera in with one cord and do everything at a remote place there.
I think that for us, that makes sense when we're doing virtual events. A massive market for Blackmagic are people who are somewhere in a room with other people in rooms, and so that that hardware going out to the cloud becomes less interesting to do that. But I definitely see where you're going. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing, if they can't do it, LCD buttons like the Stream Deck has, it would be really nice to be able to put the labels straight on the buttons. But if not, an LCD panel right on top, even if it's just simply showing how long we've been streaming for, how long we've been recording for, how much space is left on the disk, and things like that would be really nice to have on that unit.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about dreams as well, I'd love to see a 2110 support. Where you just have an Ethernet going out of it. We haven't stopped thinking about plugging things into the back. That'd be a really interesting move forward. I think those are some of our thoughts. Personally, based on recent experience, I would love to have more granular control over the color space that the switcher goes into. The switcher makes a lot of decisions. The Constellation, at least, makes a lot of decisions for us that I would prefer it not to. Like if you plug any 709 into a Constellation, this is undocumented. I'll just let you guys know that we have discovered that if you plug any 709 into a Constellation, the Constellation becomes 709. So it's kind of like, okay, we're there instead of BT 2020. Go ahead, the guy.
Yeah, of course, NDI would be the big dream, is to have converters on the other end too for the cameras that are non-Blackmagic to be able to pipe them in, and then PTZ support. So I would love to be able to just grab one of these bird dogs, pop a couple across a venue really quick with one cable and pipe it right into a switcher and be able to do super sources. That'd be amazing. So yeah, NDI.
I was really curious with the new broadcast cameras. I'm wondering whether they're going to have because they're using an SMPTE, backhaul. I was like, oh, I wonder if they're just going to make a switcher with a bunch of Ethernet jacks on the back. It's not the same. It doesn't put it on network, but Blackmagic could literally put out a switcher like what they have right now with just 20 Ethernets in the back. And so it'd just be like, we're moving from it'd be like a soft step to moving from out of BNC and into Ethernet, which would greatly reduce a lot of it doesn't fix the problems that we have because it's still just a wire. But it's an interesting, you could theoretically put the firmware in there so that eventually you wouldn't, you could turn it into anything later, if you wanted to. So anyway, next question.
Andy Carluccio, our friend from Washington, D.C., is up next with, is there a certain media server that's considering offering support for 10-bit video? Could those in the panel who use 10-bit workflows offer a concise explanation of why 10-bit support in a media server would be helpful to our line of work?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, the easy part of the 10-bit explanation is it gives you more steps between black and white for detail. Now, in a constrained environment like we use, where we're all using plain backgrounds or a fixed background, we shift as many bits as possible to what's changing in front of us. And 10-bit will actually give you more range in skin tones in the middle of the codec than what 8-bit will do.
Good.
So there's the advantage for streaming.
Good, Carl.
Yeah, so it gives you a more complete image. So if you have to push that image or put it through a key, then it'll hold up better than an 8-bit image.
Yeah, I mean, where you really start to see it are in gradients behind people. So anything that's moving softly from one thing to another. Right now in 8-bit, a lot of times it doesn't have that. Now there's other things going on. You have to say, okay, well, we're also not going to compress it really heavily either. So, with 10-bit, you have a heavier potential, but it would be great for real-time servers, for instance, to have the ability to create incredible events where we have known people on every end, where we know, hey, they've got a lot of bandwidth. We're going to go ahead and let them turn that up a little bit. Those added steps also mean that we can experiment with doing more color correction on the far end. So the server is able to do more color correction when it has more data to work with, and what essentially happens is that to expand on what Stuart said, you have 8-bit, which is 256 steps of gray per channel, or 10-bit, which is 1024 steps per gray. So we've got 4 times as many steps. And that means we're going to have less posterization. And that becomes especially important if we wanted to, for instance, go into high dynamic range, whether that be HLG, HDR10, or Vision. We now have some of the bit depth that will allow us to do that. Now that may seem crazy for real-time connections, but it will feel more real. HDR is a very interesting thing as it pertains to people feeling more like they're connected when they have these faster connections that a lot of us are going to have with 5G, fiber, all those other things. Being able to see each other and have it be even more lifelike. This is going to be the next frontier, and I think somebody's going to pay attention to that. And then that also helps creating the next big events, the next generation of broadcast, all of those things. And what we need is 10-bit to do those things. And so it's absolutely imperative. I know for us, there's some point where this panel would have to go to something other than Zoom when we really want to push the outer envelope if Zoom didn't have 10-bit. So because there'd be some point where we outgrew it, and I said, okay, well, I really want to do Vision, panels, and I need to have more color. I don't need that yet. We're just happy with where we're at, but it's coming. And so it'd be very, very important, I think, to have 10-bit. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael. Doug says, Rupert mentioned that the telecommunications companies would most likely set up translation devices from ISDN to IP. Wouldn't it be more efficient to move to an IP codec for broadcast use cases, or even use Zoom ISO for a remote contribution?
Go ahead, Leo.
So ISDN was used a hell of a lot for audio broadcasting. So in the UK, we had the Glen Sound boxes. You plug them in straight on ISDN out. The new Glen Sounds are all sitting there running with Dante and other things. But this has been a very stable and long used technology. So like anything else that's stable and long used and been reliable. So if you imagine when you had commentary on football games, and you could end up with 40 different commentators on there, and they would literally each have an ISDN line, so they could run them out and do it themselves. They would dial in a number, and it's just literally connect up. It even had battery support in the device, so it was rock solid. They're going to have to find a way of replacing all of that and moving it all over to there. There's in the big world, and I think Stuart called it very, very nicely, in the consumer seats, those that that's not so big a problem, but there is going to be some really complex things that people are looking at the side. Another good example, nothing to do with broadcast, all alarms in the UK, or a lot of alarms in the UK, work off a side channel off a line. If they snip the line, the alarm is effectively will go off. That's going to be an interesting change.
Mickey?
Yeah, it's just interesting though that a lot of the manufacturers that create portable codecs and ISDN interfaces, like Telos, Comrex also makes a bunch of them. A lot of these little portable boxes have both ISDN and IP codec outputs. So you can hook it up either to an ISDN line or just a regular network that has internet connectivity. So the transition has been happening gradually, and I think if once people kill the services, it would be a relatively easy transition for networks to go that route.
Next question.
Manolo Lozano in the UK is in next with, can you recommend a 6065 screen that offers good quality picture, good blacks, and relatively good sound for no more than $1,000?
Go ahead, Carl.
All right, so the $1,000 is a little bit tricky because you can't get any full arrays. Full arrays are going to start at around 1,300 for the 9 series from Sony and the 8 series from Samsung. LG don't do them anymore. They're focusing on OLEDs. OLEDs are going to be around 18 to 2,000 for that size. I would suggest just under $2 under $1,000, so 998 at the moment. In the US is the J series of the Sonys, which is the 80J. So that's the 2021 models, which have just come out now because of chip shortage. So they're just starting to hit the United States now. But the 80 will get you under the $1,000. The 90 will get you full array dimming, which, but as I said, you're going to be paying enough than $500 for that. But yeah, the 80J from Sony.
Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany, up next with, in my youth, I have, from my youth, I have many old vinyl records, but no record player or turntable anymore. Any recommendations on what to buy for playing and eventually digitizing some precious analog stuff? And he has a price range below 500 US.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Carl. We'll go pretty quickly. We're running out of time.
Oh, this one's a can of worms, but the basic stuff you want is direct drive rather than a belt drive, because the belt will slip or stretch and you'll get wow and flutter. The other thing is as heavy as possible turntable, so it comes up to speed and it stays at a constant speed. The other thing you'll need is a bottle of PVA glue. That is for cleaning out the grooves of the record before you play it, especially if it's been stored for a long time. You'll find YouTube videos on how to do that. The other thing is make sure you've got the right needle. If it's a stereo recording on the LP, you want a circular needle. If it is a quadraphonic recording, you need an oval shaped needle that vibrates at a higher speed.
Good, Carl.
So Technics. So look at Technics. I think they're about 600 Australian, so that'll be under the 500 US. They're essentially DJ. They're direct drive because they're DJ. They can go,
Are these the MK1200s or are they?
Yeah. So whatever they keep on
Mark
changing. I mean, different markets have different names too, but these are the DJ ones, and they're usually, I know they're $600 Australian at the moment. You can get them in white and black. Yeah, direct drive, as Stuart said, and they are like spot on. And some of them do have a USB out, but be a little bit careful of that. You might want to actually use a high quality audio interface and go into your computer that way. You will need a phono in, so you need a phono preamp as well, and they can cost about $100 for a phono preamp that will go, or get an audio interface, which is quite rare, that has a phono preamp as well.
Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Panasonic SL1200 Mark II were the ones that were all across playing records and discos and things like that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You can usually find them used, and they're built like tanks. I agree with get the right needle and cartridge to go with it.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert, real quick.
Yep, Technics, and remember, most of them will require a separate ground also.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I've been producing electronic music with a DAW, and he has a link there, for around 7 years and desire to learn keyboard skills. Would a 61-note keyboard be enough for anything that isn't piano, or would 76 notes be better?
Go ahead, Carl.
61 is fine. So all my flagships are 61. So 76 is a bit of an oddball format to play classical pieces on electrical instruments.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it really depends on the sheet music that you're playing from. If you're just doing your own electronic music, have the extra range is nice to do, but it's not needed at all. You can also put on a second keyboard to get those extra notes and then bring them in the lower or higher octaves.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is on the same thread idea, and he says, was working on an idea for an electronic music track posted in the Audio General area of Makana, I assume, and noticed the out of phase indication on my PAZ Analyzer went away when I dropped the dry wet mix on a chorus to 30%. Any other tips to maintain mono compatibility?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would probably try to on your chorus plugin, find the sweet spot and the delay that allows it to sum together cleanly without canceling each other out, and also play with if it has a stereo spread adjustment. Play with that as well to find that sweet spot that works. If all else fails, I would probably try to do the thickening, the stereo spread thickening with actual individual audio tracks, as opposed to solely relying on a chorus plugin.
And I have actually one question for everybody. Would you like to learn more about electronic music? So we've been having a building interest, and I have a building collection now of small, relatively inexpensive pieces of equipment. While you were gone, Mickey, I bought a whole bunch of things that will so
toys.
I bought a bunch of toys, some of which came in while I've been gone. So I just know that it's going to be like Christmas when I get home. But we've seen some incredible stuff kind of coming together, and I think a couple of us are interested in modular synth. A couple of us are interested in just general electronic music, and I'm thinking of doing some lab, playing around with some labs, and we have between Carl and Todd and some of and other folks that have been playing with electronic music. I thought it'd be a lot of fun. Ken got a couple toys as well. So a couple of us have been starting to play with it in the after hours, and so we may get more serious about it. It looks like we got one of our more popular polls. It's stacking up right now. We have at least 17. 17 is a pretty unusually high number for us to get this quickly. So I think that we will take that as there's probably enough critical mass for us to all play together. So we'll talk more about that in the not too distant future. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like there was nobody that was interested other than us. So it sounds like there's enough of us to play with it. So we'll be doing more with that. As I said before, I'm trying not to go crazy. I have a tendency to want to have the absolute best of something, and before you know it, I'm buying like random versions that are 30 years old or whatever. So I'm constraining myself to mostly just the Behringer replicas at the moment. So we're gonna but we'll start playing with it. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I don't think there is a best of everything when it comes to synths, because even the most horrible sounding one has a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's everything I can do. So it's everything I can do not to get a 2600. Just the Behringer 2600. I keep on opening up the thing, going, no, stop yourself. Go ahead, Todd.
There aren't any horrible sounding synths, Mickey. Only horrible sounding musicians.
Should they change that to the gnarliest sounding?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I don't mean to suggest that any musicians are really horrible, but you know what I mean.
But some are. So good, Courtney.
Synths are some of the fewest instruments that actually have a distortion knob on it that you can turn up.
Right, absolutely. All right. We are shifting gears, and we're excited to introduce Stefano Zambon and Bjorn Ehlers from Elk Live. And so Jeffrey asked if we were interested, and as soon as I looked at what Jeffrey had sent the link for, I was like, okay, I got to find out more. Like I got to see what these guys are doing. So can you? I don't know who wants to kick it off, but can you tell us a little bit about Elk Live and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure, I can start.
Okay.
So my name is Bjorn, and as you said, I have my colleague Stefano here with me. We are from the company Elk in Sweden, and we are a company that focuses on low latency audio, and we are here to talk specifically about the new service that we're about to launch, a service that is called Elk Live, as you pointed out.
And what does Elk do? Before we go to Elk Live, what is Elk? What's this? What do you do prior to Elk Live?
Well, our core technology is something called the Elk Audio OS, which is actually a low latency audio operating system for embedded devices. And Stefano can go more in depth on the different applications of that. But one of them is then, this is actually the backbone of Elk Live. Yes,
interesting.
This is actually the bridge. So Elk Live is a service that allows musicians to connect over the internet from different locations and play music together like they're in the same room.
And I will admit, the reason I was interested in it, and I was like, well, we have to have him come on, is that we have seen many people try and not do so well. so to do this, when you're talking about low latency, what kind of low latency are you talking about? What's the numbers?
Well, it's hard to give an exact number. It's because it's obviously due to the individual internet connections and the distance and everything. But on a platform like this, like Zoom, the reason why it doesn't work, we're probably up to 500 milliseconds or something like that right now.
About 220 a leg.
Yeah, so you probably need to go below 20 to 30 milliseconds to have that in the same room feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are use cases that we learned about during our beta that we're currently in, where people are it's actually possible to play certain styles of music, certain styles of instruments with high latency. But what we mean by that is normally is to get below 20 to 30 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah, go ahead. And so talk a little bit about Elk Live.
Yeah. So Elk Live has two main parts that work together to accomplish, this low latency connection. The first, you have what we call the Elk LIVE Bridge, which is this yellow thing that I saw on our website here. And that is essentially an audio network interface. And this connects to your internet router and handles the audio stream. It has preamps, audio in and audio out, and functions like a classic audio interface. And
how much is it? How much is the Elk interface?
Right now, you can pre-order it for 335 euros on our website.
And that's three, and you'll need one on each end, right? So you have
two of them. Each player in a session needs one. So, and once this is connected, you can launch the web app where you can connect to your bandmates in a Zoom-like fashion. Where it's where you have your video chat, but you also have the different controls for your audio settings. Essentially a software mixer where you can set your personal monitoring mix with a different incoming audio stream from your bandmates.
And how do you handle the mix? So you've got 5 people that are connected. How do you handle how you hear them?
Well, this is in the basic way it connects to peer-to-peer. So there's actually no master mix. Each player makes their own individual monitoring mix, right? You're sending your audio in parallel to each musician that is in the session.
Now, is this the first product? Is this your initial product for the company? Is it or the interface and the service?
Yes, it's the first one that is aimed to a consumer market.
What did you do before? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I guess Stefano, you have more input here on the different projects that we've been running. We've been involved in a few other projects where we license our operating system to hardware manufacturers.
Oh, that's great. Very good. And Stefano, do you want to elaborate at all?
Oh, just wanted to say that at the core of Elk audio operating system is an embedded Linux distribution that is good for low latency audio. And typically, when you make an audio device, you either can choose to have a lot of software flexibility, internet connectivity, and for which Linux is good, or you can decide to have low latency and good DSP performance, so you go bare metal. We are able to get the best of the two worlds with Elk Audio OS.
That's great. Now we have a bunch of questions already stacking up. This is the best part of when someone talks to me about a new product now, I always just want to do it here because instead of me trying to think of all the questions, we have a couple hundred people thinking of all the questions. So let's go ahead and Bill, let's jump into the first one.
Absolutely. It comes from our friend Victor Cajillo in Brookings, South Dakota. He said, what is the maximum distance that your solution will work on between musicians?
Well, again, it's a little difficult to answer because sometimes the network doesn't follow a straight path on the air. For example, if I have to go from here, Stockholm to London, actually the internet connection goes all the way down to Germany typically and up to London. And there are other things, but roughly we are targeting to give the same room experience with a normal internet connection in a 1,000-mile range. That's the maximum we're targeting.
Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next. Do you have a month-to-month subscription instead of an annual subscription?
Bjorn?
Yes, there is. You can apart from the bridge, you need a monthly subscription, and you can pay that monthly. It's $20, or you can pay it annually as well.
That's great. Next question.
Victor Cahillo is back with, is your hardware compatible with both 44.1 kilohertz and 48 kilohertz?
As a USB audio interface, yes. Then internally, when you stream over the internet at the moment, we're just running 48 kilohertz. But if you can connect it over to a computer's audio interface and use it 44.1.
That's great. Next question.
James Hutcherson, up next from Dublin, Ireland. He says, is Elk Live built on something like Jamulus, or is it built from its own code?
It's built from our own code.
That's great. Next question.
Leo Mindell, a pinner in the UK and here on the panel, says, what bandwidth do you need at each end? And if you have 4 musicians, do they all talk peer-to-peer?
So the minimum bandwidth that we recommend is a 10 megabit per second uplink. And we have actually various configurations. Peer-to-peer is not the only one. We also have relay servers, which decreases a lot the need for upstream bandwidth. And we have a solution with a mixing server, which decreases even further the bandwidth. Of course, they all come with some pros and cons, and it depends if you're able to get the server near you. But yeah, generally this 10 megabit per second, which today is the standard for fiber to the cabinet or fiber to the home connection, should be fine.
And sorry, it's 10 megs up, but is it more down?
No, usually it's that people, the limiting factor is more often the uplink bandwidth than the downlink bandwidth.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae is in from Dallas, Texas, and he says, can multiple bridges be backhauled to a central studio? And are there options to sync up different latencies to that location, like a time code?
So you can hook up multiple locations to a studio. That's a use case we're currently running experiments, for example, with music schools and conservatories. But that requires our custom support because we will need to help that studio to set up the server and the network configuration in there. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Different latencies, a time code, any kind of a synchronization pulse.
Yeah, we have an internal synchronization system that doesn't rely on any external support like GPS or something. That happens automatically, however, wherever you use Elk Live.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's in next with, are there plans to introduce a rack mount version of the Elk Live Bridge or integrate audio networking through Dante Sound Grid or Digital I/O for professional use cases?
Not in the short term, but we're having many discussions with several companies that are interested to integrate Elk Live into their products. The use case we see there is a device where you use something like Dante for the local audio network inside the studio, and then you want to have one outside guest connecting over Elk Live using his home internet. That's the use case we're looking for in the future.
You can almost see it like being something that you'd have in like a card in, like you just slide into your mixer. That's just the Elk, the Elk connection. Yeah, that'd be very interesting. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, asking the basic question: where did the name Elk come from?
Bjorn? Yeah. Where does the name Elk come from? I guess it comes from, it used to be that we had a music operating system, a moose, and that became the nickname. And then obviously Sweden is full of elks. So
and I understand it's full of music producers as well. So yeah, it seems like a good mix.
And it's just stuck. So now it's Elk.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae from Dallas, Texas. Can Elk Live traverse NAT, or is port forwarding required, or is a VPN recommended or not recommended for that matter?
So the VPN is not recommended, but we can transverse NAT. Actually, we put a lot of effort. We integrated the same NAT transversal technologies that are used in modern WebRTC calls. So your normal, not really Zoom, but when you run any web call on the web. So we integrated those without sacrificing latency and audio quality.
Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is back with, is there a discount available for education?
Not right now, but this is something that we are looking into. As Stefano said earlier, we are working very closely with a lot of different music schools around the world, actually, to try. And we are working also together with them to try to find a good way for music schools to get on board.
Next question.
Leo Mindell from Pinner in the UK and here on the panel. Where does the record happen, and how do you deal with one end dropping out for a short time?
So the recording happens locally on each device. And then we're working on a way that at the end of a musical session, each player can basically send his own recording to a central server, so you can have it available there with timestamps. And the second part, I'm sorry again, the two-part question are tricky.
How do you deal with one end dropping out for a short time?
Yeah, that's both part of our internal, we have an internal system of detecting when the drop packets are too high, and also part of this WebRTC things that we implement from the WebRTC stack that actually deal with this disconnection detection and try to reconnect. In the worst case, there might be a few seconds of interruption.
Good, Jeffrey.
It's important to note that this is all about the audio and not, even though there is a video component to this, it's about the audio first and then the video second. So if there's any dropouts on video, it's not as big of a deal as it is with the audio. But there have been, you guys have on your website, there have been points where you've done point-to-point video and audio recordings, and they've turned out pretty nice.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rupert McCray in Dallas again, and this time he asks, has Elk Live been used in a TV or radio broadcast environment?
Not yet, but that is certainly something that we are, a use case that we can see. It's been used in our current beta. There has been a lot of different projects, ongoing projects, among them San Francisco Opera House that have been using it to prepare for their upcoming season. And they've been recording some, but obviously not for a live TV broadcast, as you mentioned.
Interesting. Next question.
Jason Panks coming in from Nashville next. How could you integrate Elk Live with video production? Can musicians see and hear each other?
There is video in the system, but as Jeffrey pointed out, it's the video and audio is not in sync with each other for the musicians that are playing. For the simple reason that it's not possible to send video at the same speed that we are sending audio. So yes, losing that connection is the only way to achieve this kind of real-time connection with audio. But the video plays an important part anyhow. First, it plays a really important part, yes, for the basic communication, deciding on what song you should play. But even when you are playing, it actually gives you a big sense of presence of the other musicians. Even though you can't do those tight visual cues, it's kind of like playing live. It's like you're having a drummer behind you. You kind of can see them at the glimpse of your eye. So it feels a really important need, even though it's not in perfect sync.
Next question.
Andrew Lipnick, our friend from San Francisco. Can you talk a bit about latency with regard to a fast or slow music tempo, and how that might affect the performance sync between distant musicians?
I'm going to answer technically, but here the answer is really from the kind of musicians, because if you're playing something like fast jazz fusion, then you need something that's probably less than 15 millisecond latency between the two musicians. But if you're like in a Gregorian choir, something very slow, you can probably tolerate up to 100 milliseconds. So, but in the same, let's say that in the same local area, or for example, here in Sweden, between two ends of Sweden, we're able to achieve less than 10 millisecond latency. So we actually have some fast fusion musicians.
Next question.
Mike Potter is back from Hanover with, how does the UI look? What does it look like?
Well, yeah, this is one of the screenshots. This is the main session view. This is what it basically looks like when you're in a session. And then there's some other views where you create your groups, where you find your friends, where you do your setup. But this is the how should I put it? The main one where you're actually in a session.
Next question.
And
Oh,
actually,
John.
sorry, I wanted to point it out that everything is web-based, so it doesn't require any
Yeah.
installation, works on any device.
Next question.
Next question comes from our own Mickey Macador in the Philippines. And Mickey says, why is a subscription needed? Is the service just needed to initiate a connection?
So technically, there are situations where actually we run the audio through a servers, like those relay servers and mixing servers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's also other costs in managing.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather is up next from Melbourne, Australia. And he says, with the current silicon shortages worldwide, which preamps and digital audio converters are Elk using?
Oh, I'm mostly software guy, but regarding that was not easy to overcome the situation, especially for a small company like ours. And regarding the audio codecs, we're using an analog device codec, which is not like the best quality, but it has the best compromise in terms of latency quality. And I will have to look up the specific model number.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather back in from Melbourne, Australia. What are the use cases for the Elk Pi hat?
Oh, the Elk Pi hat, that is actually a different product that we have for developers and makers out there to start working with the Elk Audio OS. So it's basically a development kit if you want to start working with it. The Elk Audio is available under open source, so you can actually start playing around with it.
Interesting. So, and can you tell us a little bit more about the Elk Pi? This is something that happened. This is obviously before the Elk, right? This is kind of a more of a kind of playground for developers.
Yeah, exactly. Stefano, do you want to dive into that?
Oh no, just that mentioning that we also support third-party audio shields for the Raspberry Pi. So if you just buy one of those hi-fi berry shield, you can download. We have everything open source available for free, and you can start playing around if you have some developer skills.
That's very interesting. Next question.
Mickey is back from the Philippines with any plans on multi-channel transport?
Yes, and actually the software, I mean, it's not implemented, activated in the current version of the app, but the software already supports multiple channel. We just have to figure out a way on how to give the extra option to the user depending on their bandwidth.
Next question. Oh, go ahead, Mickey. Go ahead. You can.
I assume that would be via the ADAT input.
Yeah, we have actually.
Multi-channel.
Yeah, we have an optical input which can function both as SPDIF and ADAT, and we can have at 48 kilohertz 8 channels and less channels if you are run at a higher sample rate. And at the moment you can only transmit 2 channels and you can select where they come, so you can pick ADAT channel 2 and USB channel 4, for example.
Next question.
And Mickey's back wondering what codec Elk Live uses transport-wise.
It's our own codec, and that's actually been a big part of the solution, because most codecs have been designed for speech and they have been optimized for high latency communication. And using our own codec, which is basically lossless in the compression, and we have custom error concealment, the custom stage, all optimized for our use case.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas is up next with, is there a maximum number of bridges that can connect together in one session?
At the moment, we are artificially limiting that to 5 and 6. And further on the next year, we're going to increase that number because technically there's no limitation. And the only thing is that if you want to go above 5-6 people with a normal interconnection, you're probably going to use these external relay servers or better the mixing server.
Now, if you had enough connectivity, you could theoretically have as many as you want, right? Going in and out. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with, could you see the Elk Live technology enabling distributed concerts?
Yes, I guess so. Sometime in the future, we are looking into also sometime, I would imagine that will be next year, to also integrate the feature of broadcasting or streaming, where you can actually broadcast not only the audio, but also in sync with the video. So a passive audience, passive in the sense that they're not actually playing the session, will actually get a sync between audio and video live feed. And this obviously would take this, conceptually this virtual rehearsing room and make it into a virtual stage, right?
So the players might play a little out of sync, but by the time it reaches the viewer, it would be in sync.
Yeah, yes. For the players, the audio and video won't be in sync. But for a passive audience that actually watch it without interacting, playing in the session, they will actually have both video and audio synced together.
Interesting. A lot of us have talked about that for a long time. And we've done very different versions of that for some of these live things. But what we've done is typically given someone some kind of remote sync that basically a click track that they're not really, in our case, the latency was so high that we have the artists playing against something that's completely different than they're not hearing each other. They're executing their piece, and then it comes together. And even then over what we've been doing is in back and forth. But I could see if you had the time, if you had a way to sync all the tracks up, they would still be able to do something like that, where they have a click track that you're giving them out. They're playing, into something that syncs and then something else is syncing them all back up. You could theoretically have it all be one concert. It'd be very interesting. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, back again with, can Elk Live bridges connect together over a large local area network, for example, like across a college campus?
They can, but also have to be honest that if you have a local area network, there are better solutions like Dante or ES67.
Next question.
Andrew Lipnick from San Francisco here in the panel. How might Elk Live work within a third-party digital audio workstation, perhaps as a plug-in, to facilitate a recording session with a remotely located engineer or producer?
It's a USB class compliant UAC 2 sound card. So your workstation just sees it at any other sound card.
And so the workstation sees it as a sound card, and it sees the Elk audio coming in from the internet as an available.
Well, on the web interface, you can actually choose what to send over to the computer, which channels, and what to receive from the computer, and how to put it in the network stream.
So if I have 4 other people, I have the hardware interface, could I send all those 4 and record each one of those tracks together or apart as isolated tracks?
Yeah, for 4 people, yes, because we support up to 8 channels in the USB audio mix.
It's really interesting from a podcasting perspective. Like it just as podcaster, I've done a couple podcasts, and the idea of being able to have everybody have hardware and just be able to talk back and forth and then get all those tracks is interesting. Jeffrey?
Alex, to do something like that, you would need 4 hardware boxes and of course 4 subscriptions to the service, so you can go to each one. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also
I've got 14 Dells just to do Zooms one at a time, so it's totally possible. Go ahead, Stefano.
No, I just want to mention that if you operate at low latency and send the audio to the DAW in this way, there might be some small interruption that mostly our error correction concealment algorithm compensates for.
Is there any way for you to record ISOs locally? So
yes,
double end the recording, so it can record locally. And does it have the same time code so that you could theoretically resync it later?
Yeah, that's what I said before. It's basically every device is recording its own input locally. And then when you're done at the end of the podcast, after 1 hour, they all get sent to the cloud with timestamp information there.
Really cool. Yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
I assume preamp controls can be done through the web interface as well?
Yes, that's the only way, because we don't have any physical controls. Yeah.
Really interesting. And can you control the preamps remotely of someone else's Elk?
Not at the moment, but it's theoretically possible if that's a feature that.
That's a huge feature.
Yeah.
Like we want to be able to send out audio interfaces and not have the user have any control over them, to be honest. we want, I mean, or they could have control over them if they knew how to get to it. But the bottom line is we want to be able to change their gain, do all the things that we want to do to it, because we send these out to what we call civilians to be part of a to be part of a large conversation. We would probably buy the pieces of that hardware just for that feature. Just like literally we'd probably buy 20 of them just if we just knew that we had control over their preamp. We haven't been able to find anything that gives us internet control over the preamp through the cloud. So, I mean, that would be a feature alone that makes the product worth it, even if it didn't do anything else. Next question.
Sky Gleason here on the panel from Seattle. Is Elk Live a product for a choir to do recording from home? How many people can join at one time?
At the moment, we are limiting at 5-6 people, but with the mixing server technology, we can reach up to 25-30 people, but it's not going to be implemented at launch, something that we develop further the next year.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae is back in from Dallas, Texas. He says, I believe Sweden has very good fiber internet coverage. Is Elk Live most suited to fiber internet connections where latencies are generally lower?
Yes, but not just Sweden, I guess today, fiber to the home, which is when the fiber actually arrives directly to your building, which is the best. Or fiber to the cabinet is very common now, both in the States and Europe. And the Elk Live has been tested extensively over the fiber to the cabinet. That's also good enough.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather back from Melbourne, and he says the Blackbird module looks like a fun project for effects. Is there an equivalent unit planned as an Elk Live enabled audio mixer?
This is once again, this is for the development kits, which the Blackbird is basically a controller for the Elk Pi. There is currently there is no real plans for further development of these kits. So yeah.
Fascinating kit. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, back with, are you seeing Elk Live being used for one-on-one musical tuition?
Yes, this is actually something that we have as a part of our beta. We've been working with quite many different music schools, the Royal College of Music here in Sweden being one of them, where they actually been piloting this for education, and also both ensembles, small ensembles, but also the one-on-one.
Next question.
Leo Mendel in Pinner, the UK, says, if you have a guest musician for just one session, can they join without the hardware?
No, if you want to be part in the session to play, you need the hardware. That is where the low latency connection is made.
Next question.
Greg Kurta, our friend in Steinkjer, Norway, says, so with the differences in audio and video for the players, would the workflow be just to ignore the video?
You mean when you're actually playing? Well, I guess that's up to the individual musicians. When I use it, I actually use the video quite a lot. It's not in sync, and you don't do this really tight visual cues. But as I said, it gives you a real sense of presence. It's not as weird as you would think it is. So I use it quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of us are out of sync talking over Zoom a lot of the time. So I think people get kind of used to it, probably more used to it now than ever. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather's up next, and he asks, are there any plans to get the Elk Live box supported for direct input into OBS or vMix?
Yes, I mean, that's technically something that you can just do because it's an audio interface again. So you can just connect the audio interface to OBS Studio, but we have further plan to expand on more broadcasting features in the future.
That's great. Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas is in with, what ways do you see musicians having a side channel for comms?
Bjorn?
You mean a side just a talkback function, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is actually a already built into the system where you can use your the built-in microphone on whatever device you're using, your phone or iPad, or just as a talkback. We call it the talkback audio. So then it's not, obviously, it's not in real time, but it's for easy access. Like I say, if I play direct plugged bass into the bridge, I can easily just, you know, speak right into the computer to give some cues, audio cues.
It would be really interesting for a producer to be able to target someone in the group that they could talk directly to through the system. So there's just a producer that's another member of the band, so to speak, but they're considered a producer. So they could talk to everyone, but they could also say, I want to talk to that person. So they could have a private conversation with one of the musicians and have a kind of a privilege that they're able to do that not necessarily everybody is, or maybe you let everybody do it. But I think as a producer role, it'd be really interesting. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McRae back from Dallas. Does Elk Live show any statistics for network performance or have any troubleshooting tools built in?
The app is collecting a lot of data. We have latency, histogram, drop packets, percentages, so on. We still have to decide how to show these things to the user. So right now they are for internal usage.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood up next with, is your proprietary codec a constant bit rate like FLAC or a variable bit rate? And if it is a constant bit rate, is it tied to your internal or shared word clock signal?
It is a constant bit rate. And again, it's almost lossless, just straight PCM with a few things around it. And yes, it is tied to our internal clocks there on the device.
Next question.
Todd Reynolds in from North Adams, Massachusetts again. Would it be possible for you to do a demo for us or point us to an audio or video where tight rhythmic playing is evident?
We have quite a lot of videos on our YouTube channel with different ensembles and different types of music. So maybe we can share a link to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a bunch of musicians in this group that would love to test this. Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas comes in with, can Elk Live process echo cancellation if used with open speakers?
Not yet at the moment. That's not a use case we're considering for musical production, but in the future, if we want to expand to more like high quality audio conferencing, that's something we'll eventually have to integrate.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne says, I asked the question wrong. Are there any plans for an audio mixer that has an Elk Live integrated into it?
And go ahead, Stuart. You can elaborate if you want.
Yeah, what I meant is like just a surface or a panel that has the network connection that your audio operator would use, rather than needing to have multiple Elk Live devices as breakout points at the studio or wherever the mixing is being done on a traditional analog mixer.
Yeah, the thing is that we are still quite a small company. Our focus is really the software part. So we're not it was a big effort for us to make a hardware product. So that's why we're discussing with other companies. We would like some other companies to build that, and we're very happy to license our technology for the network part.
Next question.
Rupert McRae is back from Dallas, Texas. Can Elk Live be used anywhere? Can the bridges be shipped and used worldwide, essentially?
Right now, in this first launch, we are focusing on Europe, US, and Canada. And that is mainly due to we being a small company, being able to support the first batch of users.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, yes.
Could you could connect anywhere worldwide, but you might have higher latency. It doesn't stop you from doing it. It's just that the latency may get higher than you need.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Why don't you guys, Bjorn and Stefano, talk about the specifications that are needed to connect up a device? Will it work on a PC? Will it work on a Mac, the newer Mac or older Mac?
Oh, as I said, it's web-based. So it's literally it works on everywhere where you have a modern browser.
Interesting. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia, back in with, can you share some of the Elk history about how you developed your own OS?
Oh yes. So the story started. We actually started making this guitar of the future. It was the Census guitar, and then we realized that actually the technology we developed behind the guitar to make that happen, it was this combination of making Linux very low latency, and the other big part was being able to integrate easily software that was already available for computers. So we can literally take VST plugins. We have former collaboration with Steinberg. You can just recompile the plugin without changing the source code. It runs straight in the embedded device at low latency. So that was basically the big change and the foundation of Elk, being both easy to prototype, but also robust to scale for industrial production.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rupert McRae again, and Rupert says, how has the COVID lockdown changed the Elk Live use cases?
Well, I guess it went from us having a what people thought was a really cool idea to being very much of a necessity. You know, when all the alternatives went away, obviously this people understood what we've been kind of preaching for quite some time. Right. But we see this as something that goes well beyond the pandemic. I guess I would say that almost everyone that has used it, their first reaction has been, oh man, I wish I had this years ago. Right. So it's of course very needed now, but this is, our aim is really to give musicians the same opportunities that other trades have, you know, being able to work remotely in a much bigger sense.
Next question.
Andy Lipnick from San Francisco here on the panel. Currently, can you have two separate instances of Elk Live be running in sync to increase the number of users in a given session?
I'm not sure if I understand. So it is, let's say, like if you have two devices in the same location, will that increase the number of people? That's the question.
I'll give you maybe the use case is more important because it does piggyback off what Alex was saying earlier. The idea that you have a group of musicians playing together, and you have a musical director who needs to cue those individual musicians without other musicians hearing them. And this would be actually, they already do this in live performance, you know, with a live audience and all of that, where someone is sometimes talking down someone's monitor mix to say in 3, 2, 1, you know, things like that. That's the use case, I think, here.
Yeah, that feature is actually, I mean, we haven't considered it yet, but it's actually pretty simple. You just need to basically send some mute and solo messages to the individual users. And so it's definitely possible to accommodate in the future.
One thing that it seems like would be possible is using Elk hardware. You could, in Elk Live, you could do a performance over Zoom. The artists would be listening to each other in very low latency. They wouldn't be listening to each other through Zoom. But as they go out through Zoom, it may not be perfect, but they would be more in sync. You know, like,
oh yeah, we tried that. That was one of the first things we tried when we started playing around before we even had our own video chat.
Next question.
Rupert is back with what are your RMA process in case of any hardware problems, so return merchandise authorizations?
We're relying on a company here in Sweden for the manufacturing and distribution, and they will handle that. So it was going to be 1 year warranty on our side, and the second year like the standard laws in Europe.
Next question.
Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin. Can you use computer-based side chains in audio, or do you have it before coming into the hardware?
So I think if I understand correctly, the question is if you can actually use it as input to the device, the audio coming from the computer, and the answer is yes. So if you connect the device's USB sound card, you can actually send the audio stream from the computer. It will have the latency of the computer added, but it will work.
Next question.
Yeah, but and just to clarify, so you have software like EQ and WLM and people use audio hijack to move things around. Will that add latency to what you're doing, or will it come across with any type of software effects compression or anything like that, or does that have to happen before into the hardware device?
So currently we have a very minimal mixing setup inside the device. So it's just basically basic equalization and volume and panning. Since we have a very powerful audio engine, we can run plugins. Potentially we can add any kind of plugins we want. And there we will just have to be careful to choose plugins that don't introduce latency.
Next question.
Moving to Rupert McCrae again. Are cloud recordings available if retained if a subscription has expired?
Guess Bjorn?
Well, I don't really have a good answer to that. We haven't delved in right to that, but I would assume so, but I don't have a clear answer on that.
Next question.
Leo Mendel, Pinner UK. Are you able to demo the product here? Well, we talked about that earlier.
Not right now, unfortunately not. We are still working out a way on technically on how to demo this in a way that it makes sense, so you can actually stream the performance from different locations. It's so you get so you can really understand the experience.
Right.
But hopefully we'll come back to you on that in a short time so we can demo it.
Sounds good. I can't say, a shameless plug here, that if you sent 5 of us these, we would figure it out pretty quickly. we lab these things really fast. There's Todd and Jeffrey and a couple other people. If they had them, they would just bang on them for hours, and they're pretty good. We'd get Victor involved and get a couple other folks here. We'd figure out how to hack it together, and then we'll send it back to you of like, here's a demo of how to show it.
That's very good. We'll keep that in mind.
And
we'll save you some time.
Alex, what is the qualifications? You talk about Alex and Todd. I mean, give them a bit of a reference to help them understand that this is not a hobby for us.
We have our own band. So that's all I have to say. And people like Todd and Carl and Jeffrey and everything have a very, and Victor have a very deep musical skill set. So I think that I'll leave it at that. But it's very, they're innovators. They work very deeply into this area and do very high level recording already. So anyway, it's not just a bunch of geeks that want to bang on the hardware. It's folks that could probably put it through its paces pretty quickly.
And if I could just add to that.
And Andy, by the way, Andy's part of the band.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, Andy.
There were a few of us last year, during April, May, around then, I think it was, who really did start testing all the different platforms that for distant music collaboration, and we gave up on them. Yeah. And our band does not work with a music, remote music solution. We are literally just trading tracks back and forth.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
From the first of all, hello. I haven't spoken to either of you yet, Bjorn or Stefano. Thank you for coming today. Myself and my colleagues have been, beating upon Jack Trip and SoundJack and everything for the past year. And of course, I have a couple of friends who've been extremely successful with it, except that it's hard for the general user to really grok. So the place that I appreciate your product so much is that at a consumer level, I think this is super important for people who just could not ever look at Jack Trip or find out a single thing about it. So it's really nice to have something that's automated. So I have a quick question, if you don't mind, Alex, and the two of you, just in terms of sample size and buffer size. I think I actually just put it in the questions. I forgot, but regarding the actual audio interface portion of this, is it adjustable? How are you working with that particular part of the latency of the audio card?
So that only matters if you actually use it as an audio device, because if you just plug it, analog to the ARC bridge and you send over the internet, it will use its own internal buffer size, which is currently 32 samples at 48 kilohertz. And regarding when you connect it to the computer, we're using the class compliant drivers, so that's going to be typically 64 and up.
Great, that totally answers my question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think also there are other possible use cases for low latency audio transport that is specifically hardware based. That gives a lot of assurance that it's something that can work standalone without a computer. We were talking earlier about the ISDN going away and being replaced by IP codecs, and using this in similar instances would be very useful, especially if multi-channel comes in.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae back from Dallas again. He says, do you have any other integrations with other platforms on your roadmap?
I guess we're having some discussion, but not any company name we can mention yet.
Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore is up next. Thoughts on using eDrums with software like addictive drums or superior drums, which already have some latency in them. Will using this still be a viable option?
I guess you'll have to experiment. Yeah, if you produce the audio from your computer, then you have the computer who's adding quite a bit of latency. And sometimes, most cases, we will add actually more latency on your local computer than in the rest of the chain. So if you're in the same city, maybe it will work. If you're in the South City, well, you have to find out.
Go ahead, Mickey.
You would at least get rid of half of the latency with your monitoring, with the drummer's monitoring, though, so that would still help out.
Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas. Are there musical instruments that are more or less suited being used over Elk Live?
No, I don't think so. This is equally good for everything, I would say.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae back again from Dallas. If a click track is used, where is this best inserted in the workflow?
Stefano?
I guess one of the things that would be really interesting to me is to that question, I think that it would be really interesting if the device itself could generate a click track where it's syncing to the other devices so that everybody's getting the same click track. That would
Yes, it can. Yeah, basically short answer. Yeah.
It can do that now?
Yeah, it's not implemented in the UI, but the devices are basically what the devices are doing are measuring accurately all the latency between all the points. And so they can compensate. The problem is that you can have a perfect synchronized click track if you have two people, because you know what's the latency of one person, you know what's your own internal monitor latency. You just add you compensate delay. If you have more than one, then you have to decide on which one to synchronize, or if you take an average and so on. That's the tricky part there.
Right.
Who's the click leader?
Jeffrey?
It's also important to remember that the box also has MIDI integration. So, and of course, MIDI latency is a lot better than an actual audio latency.
Next question.
Trevor New in Beacon, New York is in next with, do you have the capability to potentially test this with a larger group all located in the same city?
If you're able to deploy a server in that city, so using one of the server-based solutions, especially the mixing server solution, then absolutely yes. And we are working with Amazon, AWS web services. They're launching these local zones, so they're basically giving you more granularity. You can choose to have, I want to have a server in LA. Now you can choose that.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, says, does the Elk Bridge have any conventional analog I/O for integration into a larger system?
Well, the I/O is the analog I/O is what you can see on the specification on the website. So you can have both line level and mic level inputs.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas back again with, what is the lead time from ordering and subscribing to being online and operational with Elk Live?
Well, we are aiming for a Q4 delivery on both the hardware and to go live with the system. We are still need to wait a little bit until down a hard date, but Q4 this year.
Next question.
Trevor New from Beacon, New York is in with, I came in a little late here. Are you using peer-to-peer connections or server client? And is it possible for a person to set up their own server? I have Fios Gigabit in Brooklyn.
So we're using both. As I said, we have these three topologies: peer-to-peer, relay, or mixing. And if it's possible to use your own server, that's something that we offer the possibility to some musical institution. So some big institution, we can offer custom support for that, but we're not giving the possibility to a single user at the moment.
Next question.
Mickey here in the panel from the Philippines says, any plans on opening up the ability for individuals to build and run their own
This is the same question. Everyone's like, oh, I have an idea. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Rupert
next
McRae. Is there a maximum latency at which Elk Live will not be able to negotiate a connection?
No, I mean, not any practical latency. We use it from Sweden to Australia, and we still had less latency than local Skype calls inside Sweden. It's not usable for any musical production, but it works.
Next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas. What is your technical support model for end users?
I guess, I mean, we have we already have set up an integration with a system in Zendesk, so user will be able to actually click a button and submit reports, and we collect all the logs needed to analyze any issues there.
Next question.
And the last one currently in the queue right at the moment from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne. Can you demo how the producer can control the end user's interface?
I don't think that's done yet, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's not implemented yet, but.
Yeah, good. No, we got one more question.
Oops, last minute entry. Here it is, just came over, and it says from Todd Reynolds here in the panel, how should an educational institution approach you about beta testing your product?
They should just contact us on our website, and we will set up a meeting and discuss that further. Simple as that.
Okay, you have some last minute entries here in the question sweepstakes. Rupert McRae again from Dallas, Texas says, can a bridge be transferred between Elk Live customers?
So could you buy like 5 bridges and send them to different people all the time?
Yes, they're not personal in that sense. They're not tied to
do you have control over the latency where you could say, I want to make sure that it's more stable, so I'm going to increase the latency so I have a larger buffer between them? So for instance, for music, we want it to be at 20 or 30 milliseconds. For spoken word, like a podcast, I may say, 100's okay. Let's just turn that up a little bit so that it's a little, so I've got a little bit of a buffer there for the connection.
So technically, that's very easy, and the software has the capability to do that. But our initial focus is really to give this plug and play experience. That's why, for example, right now, the internal buffering is all automatic. So we detect what's the drop rate, and we adjust to this situation. But it's definitely possible to adjust that.
Next question.
Yeah, Stuart Fairweather is in with another last minute one. With the planned launch, can we lock you both into a return appearance when you're delivering products for an in-depth demo?
Will you come back? I hope we're hoping that you had a good time.
Yes, of course.
This is a grueling group. There's a lot of a lot of questions coming in pretty fast. So
no, but of course, once we have the demo up and running, we'll love to come back.
We'd love to have you come back. So when you guys are ready, we're super. I mean, this is what a lot of us do is virtual production, and in many ways. And so this is something that we're all tracking very closely. And you seem to have a great product. I think that we would love to follow along with what you guys do. I was really excited when Jeffrey brought up the possibility of bringing you on. As soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, we have to know. So so we'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
Bjorn, Stefano, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to and for everyone watching, you can see why, nowadays I've literally every new product I've lost interest in having a personal conversation about how that product works. I'm like, this will save me a lot of time if we just do it as a group. So it is a much easier thing because all of us are, smarter than any one of us. So it's really a lot of fun. Thank you to the producers who have put together such a great set of questions today and really drove the conversation forward. And thank you again, as always, to our panelists who have done a great job at keeping the conversation moving forward. Once again, thank you to Stefano and Bjorn. It was just really a pleasure. We're really excited about your product, and we can't wait for us to maybe help test it and buy in bulk. So when you're ready. So we're looking forward to that. For everyone, remember, warning the panelists that tomorrow is Ruthless Reviews. So get your best foot forward. We're going to go through everybody's connection and see how things look. And then remember, Thursday we'll then break down everybody's kits and talk about them. So that's coming up next. But right now we're going to jump into after hours. All right. See you, everybody.
See you. Thank you.